Got all these speakers, and that's a major undertaking. I don't want to spend time talking about all the speakers. I'll just refer them to.
Hafiz Bhai, please, I think.
Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to see a few participants joining us together with the panelists today. My name is Henry Neufeld, and I am the head of the Impact Assessment and Adaptation Unit at UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center, where I am right now. And together with the participants, which I will briefly introduce in a few minutes, we will talk about transparency and adaptation to enhance the ambition of nationally determined contributions, NDCs. And the work that will be presented is based on the ICAT project. ICAT stands for Initiative for Climate Action Transparency. And I will present what that stands for, what it does a little bit before moving on to the other panelists. So to introduce the panelists, we have our project partners here together with us who have implemented the ICAT adaptation project in a range of pilot countries, in Bangladesh, in India, in Kenya, in South Africa, and the Dominican Republic. And we have speakers from all of these countries except for the Dominican Republic who couldn't make it today. So who will present how the ICAT project is being implemented, or was being implemented in their pilot countries, and what the outcomes of that work were. So after my brief introduction, I will hand over to Priya Chaudhuri, who's with BCAS. And I don't want to go into the descriptions and give more information on the bios of the speakers. Please follow the web link to this conference. There is a detailed description of all the speakers and the agenda there. So you can see our speakers. I mentioned Priya Chaudhuri. She's a senior research officer at Bangladesh Center for Advanced Studies. Then we have Amlan Mishra from TERI, the Energy and Research Institute. He's a research associate there. We have from Kenya, Veronica Ndetu, who is the head of the climate change unit at the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development. Then we have from our colleagues in South Africa, we have Darlene Lutta. She's a senior researcher of the Climate Services Research Group at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, and then also Tirusha Thambiran, apologies if I'm getting the name a bit wrong. She's also with CSIR and a principal researcher there. And then we have, following these presentations, we have a panel of two interesting researchers joining us. Taurine is from ICAD, so the host organization, and she will provide some feedback on locally led adaptation in the context of ICAT, the ICAT project. And Kavya Michael is a scientist at Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden. She's Indian from heritage, but she works in Sweden. And she will talk about the gender and justice lens in the context of the ICAT project. So basically, Taurine and Kavya will provide some insights following the presentations to kick off the conversation. And I'm hoping that the attendees, those who are listening, will then join our conversation and provide some questions to the speakers that we can then discuss. So I'll start with a short presentation of the ICAT project. I'll start sharing my screen and hope that that works. Where is it? Here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you, Attorney. So, transparency and adaptation to enhance ambition of NDCs. And I will talk about adaptation in the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency. ICAT, the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency, had the main objective of ICAT is to strengthen the capacity of countries to plan, implement, monitor, and evaluate effective and efficient adaptation in a transparent manner for both domestic purposes and to meet the requirements under the UNFCCC Paris Agreement. So, central to the Paris Agreement is the Enhanced Transparency Framework, which is a requirement for enhancing ambition and building trust in the Paris Agreement. And while on the mitigation side, this Enhanced Transparency Framework is very specific about what to do, how to communicate emission reductions, on the adaptation side, there is no such thing. The instructions are very vague, and the countries do not know very often how to communicate, how to report their adaptation actions. And ICAT is attempting to support the countries in doing that by building tools and methodologies, enhancing capacity and peer-to-peer learning in the partner countries. And within the ICAT adaptation project, which started in 2019 and is now coming to an end, we focused on 5 countries, as I mentioned before: Bangladesh, India, South Africa, Kenya, and the Dominican Republic. And in Bangladesh, our focus was domestic climate finance tracking, and Priya will talk about that. In India, the focus was on agriculture and irrigation, and Amlan will speak more about that and how this work is being implemented or pursued further at the national scale. In South Africa, our work focused on 2 elements: multi-hazard early warning systems and impacts of climate-related disasters. And in Kenya, the focus was again on agriculture, climate-smart agriculture, so a link between increasing productivity, enhancing resilience, and reducing emissions. And then in the Dominican Republic, which we will not hear about, the focus of the work was on agriculture and tourism. So developing methodologies here at the national level that help the countries in achieving their adaptation objectives and enhancing their capacity and ambition for adaptation action. In addition, we at UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center developed a number of adaptation guidance materials as well. And I just put basically the 3 titles of these guidance documents on the screen here. The first one is integrating subnational and non-state actors into systems for monitoring and evaluating national climate change adaptation policy. And what that means is that it is really difficult for a national government to implement a strategy, a law, a climate approach at the local level, even if because it's developed at the national level, but it needs to be implemented at the local level. And connecting vertically between the national and subnational levels requires a lot of capacity. It requires a lot of understanding and stakeholder engagement. And this document provides the information necessary to carry out these activities in an efficient way. Basically, none of this is rocket science, but we have thought the processes through for the national governments so that they can implement this work much more easily. The second methodology focuses on losses and damages, assessing climate change-driven losses and damages. And as the name says, we look at ways to assess non-economic and economic losses and damages. And there are differences between losses and damages, of course. And this document provides foundational information on how to do this at the national levels. And it's connected and based on partially to the work carried out with our South African colleagues. And the third and guidance document that we developed is about fostering successful adaptation. And this is a tool that will help project planners at all levels develop better adaptation projects. It basically uses a theory of change approach to anticipate what good adaptation projects might look like and the elements that are necessary for achieving more successful adaptation and reducing the risk for maladaptation is really important. And this tool helps project planners do that. So those are the three guidance documents that we here at UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center developed. And these documents are partially based on the work that was carried out with our partners in the countries. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention and pass on the baton to Priya. I'll stop sharing my screen now, and then I will ask Priya to share her screen and give her a short presentation in 10 minutes, please, Priya. Thank you. Now I need to stop sharing. Okay. Priya, go ahead. You have the word. You have the floor. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Henry, for the introduction. I am Soburnessa Chaudhary Priya. I am working as a senior research officer at Bangladesh Center for Advanced Studies, BCAS, and we are working in Bangladesh on the ICAD project in partnership with ECAD, who happen to be also the host of this conference. So I would like to take this opportunity to first of all thank them for arranging such an amazing platform for knowledge exchange. So before I start my presentation, I would just take a minute. I am having a little bit difficulty looking at my own. So is my screen visible to everyone? Can one of the hosts please confirm?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. So I will be talking about our efforts towards tracking adaptation projects that are being funded by Bangladesh Climate Change Trust, which is BCCT. So first of all, to understand why we are really having this conversation on tracking adaptation projects, and in fact having this week-long conference which is dedicated to monitoring locally led adaptations. So Henry has already mentioned the significance of this in the Paris Agreement. And the governments who have signed for the agreement are also incorporating these in their own national plans and strategies. And similarly, the government of Bangladesh is also doing so. We have the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, which is being currently revised. And there will be a dedicated chapter for monitoring and evaluation of climate change impacts and how we are being able to enhance the adaptive capacities and reduce the risks and vulnerabilities. So monitoring adaptation projects also allow us to have an insight on the localized impacts of climate change, which otherwise may go unnoticeable. So it is very important for governments to also identify the scope for prospective interventions going forward, and therefore also in the decision-making processes, and also also for policy directives. So having a good monitoring system in place for adaptation projects will also reflect the commitment and competency of the relevant government organizations, and hence allow them to set new ambitions, which again, going back to the first point of the global adaptation goals. So to go on with my presentation, it's important that I give you an overview of the Bangladesh Climate Change Trust. The trust has the sole authority of managing and mobilizing the domestic climate finance in Bangladesh. They currently have more than 300 projects going on out of almost 780 projects, which has already been approved by their trustee board since the inception of BCCT in 2009. The projects that BCCT are funding are based on the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan. And so they have a set of themes and relevant programs and actions defined within the BCC SAP. And BCCT follows those themes, which includes 6 thematic areas and 44 programs. And it goes by the rules defined in the Climate Change Trust Act, which was established in 2010. So why are we really doing this work with ICAT, and why was this necessary that we help the government of Bangladesh develop a system for monitoring their adaptation projects? So the existing monitoring system that BCCT had was focused on tracking only the finance and the physical progress of their projects. They had a bunch of forms, just a couple of forms actually, which only tracked their progress of mainly which was focused on infrastructure. So it recorded how much progress has been done on these constructions, and the financial disbursements also dependent on that progress. So since BCCT has limited human resources, and they barely have enough personnel to visit and monitor on a regular basis, and essentially no evaluation process of these projects. So they would just get projects approved, do them, and then that's it. So it was important for us to introduce this system because we needed to track how much they are contributing to enhance the adaptive capacity of the communities who are benefiting from these projects, and also how they are reducing the vulnerabilities of these communities and their beneficiaries. So with ICAT, this is a simplified form of what we are doing with support from ICAT. So initially we have identified the needs of the government in Bangladesh. So in the previous phase of the project, ECAD has conducted some needs assessment and stakeholder mapping, and they have identified the BCCT as the key stakeholder who we could work with. So we have further worked on that and picked up from there. And currently what we are doing, BCAS's role in this ICAT project in Bangladesh is to devise some tools which will support BCCT to track their monitoring system. And alongside our partner ECAD is working on developing a set of capacity building materials, which will be used to, when we introduce these tools to the stakeholders of BCCT, which are mainly the project implementers of the BCCT funded projects. And overall with this, with this initiative, we are aiming for a transparent financial, transparency of adaptation finance through an improved reporting process. So tracking these projects will allow us to eventually contribute to the national and global reporting of adaptation action. So I will now go on about the tool that we have developed for we are developing for BCCT. So it is a dynamic web-based tool. So this accommodates different user types. So the project implementers will have a different set of login system, and they will be, once they log into the website, they will be able to report on their progresses, while the BCCT officials and others will have their designated user IDs, and they can log in and check on track their progress, and then also keep a track on when to release the funds and so on. So the thematic areas that we are focusing on currently are food security, social protection and health, comprehensive disaster management, and infrastructure. So these are mostly based on both mostly the themes that focus more on adaptation, as well as the ICAT priorities. And we have also included infrastructure because so far the highest amount of investments from BCCT has gone into this sector. We are also trying to align these with the SDG goals, Sustainable Development Goals, and the indicators that are already there and globally accepted. So this is still on progress, and we are ultimately, there will also be a dashboard for enhancing transparency and accountability. So anybody can go on to this webpage and have a brief overview of the kind of work that BCCT is doing, where they are investing more, and which geographical areas and which sectors and so on.
Yeah. 2 minutes, please.
Okay, sure. So ultimately, the goal, as I said, would be to enhance the transparency and accountability of the overall climate adaptation action in Bangladesh. So it is not only the first time that we are working with BCCT on this issue. BCS has been involved with BCCT since 2017 to work on climate finance transparency. And BCCT is not only depending on donor-driven initiatives for this kind of activities, they have also funding their own they also have their own initiatives to go about this process. So they have also taken up some initiatives to enhance their monitoring and evaluation capacities. So it has not always been a smooth sailing boat. So we did have some challenges and constraints that we had to face while doing this work. And in the interest of time, I think I will skip that part. But so moving ahead, what do we need to do next? So far, we've only been talking about monitoring and evaluation. So I think moving forward, it is important that we also incorporate the learning component here, and not only just have this tool and generate information for reporting on adaptation, but also take up the learning and utilize that to develop local and national level plans and strategies, which will also help BCCT to decide where to fund next, and also decide this can be integrated with their project selection process as well. So, and of course, since climate change is such a dynamic topic, it is necessary that the tool is updated from time to time according to the current context. And we hope that eventually we will be able to take up this as a pilot and introduce this kind of systems to other ministries and really other government agencies who are working on climate action. So thank you. I will wrap up with this. Thank you so much for everyone who joined from all around the world. That's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Priya. Really great to see that. And can I just ask Amlan to start sharing his screen as well so that he can give his presentation? And thanks a lot, Priya. Again, if you have questions, please keep them for yourself. I think it's possible that you speak directly. Otherwise, it will be possible to put your questions into the chat box. You can put them in there already as well. And I'll just hand over to Amlan now because he's apparently sharing his screen. So, Amlan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Henry. I hope the screen is visible and the presentation is visible to everyone. If you can just let me know that.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you so much. So good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, sure, Henry. I would be presenting the work done in India by Terry under the ICAT project, which has been developing a national MEL framework for tracking adaptation in the agriculture sector. And it's a great pleasure to be here and an honor to be presenting to you all. So I hope there is a lot of takeaways from our presentation today for all of you. So a very quick introduction, which I think Priya has already covered quite well about the need, and Henry in his presentation about the need for transparency and the work that ICAT does to support countries with custom-made tools and methodologies. And it is especially a major challenge for developing nations like India, where climate risks are already elevated by high levels of social vulnerability. And the M&E component of this project can help us really identify the success stories as well as do course corrections and adjustments during the life of the project as well. Just a brief idea about the different climatic risks and hazards that India faces. It is some of the highest disaster risk levels in the world, as well as there are going to be anticipated projections of temperature for India align or are higher than the expected temperature rise globally. There is several climatic disasters such as floods, droughts, cyclones, heat waves, and cloud bursts. And a combined GDP impact of just the floods is considered to be 7 billion per year, which is a significant amount for a developing nation like India, which needs the money to carry out sustainable development practices as well. And the reason that these climatic risks and hazards are so important is because of how the Indian agricultural sector is structured, because the agriculture sector is the primary source of livelihood for 58% of India's population, and yet most of the population is small operational farm holders. It's 85% of farmers operating on less than 2 hectares of land. it's the contribution to the GDP is decreasing, but the number of people employed in agriculture remains the same, and this is even more pertinent when we consider the rural structure of some of India's regions. Um, there is a definite vulnerability to climate change, especially the risks and hazards that we have outlined, and there is a key need for adaptation, and the financial needs of adaptation in India has been estimated at 206 billion in 2015. This is a bit out of date, and I'm sure that this amount has risen far more at current prices. So, so how we have approached this project?
I'm sorry, but you're going to miss your 10 minutes easily if you continue with the first slide, and you've already passed nearly half of your time. So I just recommend that you go straight to the main components. I'm sorry to have to interrupt you, but we are on a tight schedule. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. No worries. I'll just move quickly on to the MEL component. So very quickly, the MEL component has been developed by first taking into account several subnational case studies in Telangana, Odisha, and Puducherry. And the adaptation measures that are implemented at state level have been used to develop and scale up the national level intervention, so that we have an understanding of the stakeholders involved in the process. So some of the subnational case studies are outlined here, and they're all related to adaptation around agriculture and water management. They're funded by different agencies in India, and all of them relate to a bottom-up approach that we have then further used to build our top-down approach of the national level framework for the agricultural sector, especially the policy priorities and who the stakeholders have been built from here. So some of the national agriculture initiatives that we have looked into, especially the adaptation specific ones, are listed down here. I'll just skip this slide in the interest of time, and I'll move on.
We're not seeing any slide. I'm not seeing any slide move.
Is it visible now?
No. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So framework components in the national framework. We have developed 6 different components for the framework. So biophysical would be the direct impacts of the environment, of agriculture on the environment, such as water management, climate resilient cropping practices, and soil health management. We have also looked at socio-cultural components, which is about changing farming practices in India through livelihood diversification, through organic and traditional farming practices. We have looked at the technological innovations that can go into improving agriculture, such as the updating of digital solutions, remote sensing, and ICT. The economic impacts for value addition to the agricultural practices, such as market linkage, last mile connectivity, and post-harvest value addition. These financial components that go into helping farmers with financial inclusivity, risk management, crop insurance, etc., as well as the regulatory framework around the agricultural sector in India, such as the introduction of new schemes, the budget allocated in the Union Budget of India for agriculture, and as an example of the indicators that we've developed, I have added an indicator from each of the component in this table, such as in biophysical, we look at the irrigation component. So the built-up would be that the output indicator looks at the direct solution that the scheme is providing, such as number of farmers adopting efficient irrigation systems. Then we look at the midterm outcome of such an output indicator, which would hopefully be a change in the amount of irrigation water used per unit of crop land. And then we look at the long-term impact indicator, which is the change in water availability. So ideally, we look at output indicator just after the implementation of the project, the outcome indicator as a period of, say, 3 to 6 months, monitored regularly, and the impact indicator probably over a couple of years to see if the project is actually having the tangible impact that we believe it to have. Similarly, for sociocultural, it's organic practices, weather advisory systems for technological, and similar examples for economic, financial, and regulatory components. Moving on, the evaluation and the learning components will judge essentially how the projects are working and if the implementations are having the impact that we believe that they have, as well as identify challenges and necessary course corrections for the project. One of the key important parts that we have added in the project is also to ensure that the indicators themselves are iteratively refined and are and are going through the same MEL process that we have added for the project, for the different projects as well. Lastly, for a way forward, we are looking to pilot test the indicator-based framework in ongoing and future national level projects, as well as do training and capacity building of the stakeholders, both national and local. Most importantly, it's important to understand the stakeholder needs for future research and study, which we'll be doing first in the subnational case studies that we have followed in the 3 different states, as well as with national stakeholders, so that the MEL framework that we eventually end up with is robust, flexible, and can be tracked over a long period of time. So I'll stop here. I'm sorry for the delay as well as some of the technical issues, and I'll be happy to share the presentation with anyone who's interested. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Amlan, also for sticking to the time. And I'm sorry that I interrupted you because I couldn't see the slides moving forward. And I was sort of under the impression that you were just talking about a lot of things. Anyway, it's great that what you showed us. Maybe you could just say a few words about how this tool is being implemented through NABARD while we're waiting. And then I can ask. Then in the meantime, I can ask Veronica to start sharing her screen. Go ahead.
Yes, definitely. So NABARD has been one of the biggest supporters of us throughout this ICAT project. And it is with the help of them that we have been sort of looking at the digitization of the indicator framework, because there is already an existing MEL framework that they use, and we are hoping that ours builds upon it and makes it more robust. So NABARD works across the 28 states of India and has projects in every state. So it would, and as they work mostly in the agricultural sector, only in the agricultural sector, it is very essential that our indicator framework is aligned with the needs of NABARD, and as well as the financial and technical requirements of reporting that they have. And of course, that the fact that they work with the Ministry of Agriculture is an added bonus. So NABARD is currently looking at the digitization part of it. We have meetings set up to share this tool with them, and some key takeaways that they have proposed to us are also being incorporated into the framework. The most important part being that to strike a balance between both monitoring and implementation. One of the key things that I've always mentioned so far is that over the past few years, we've been very focused on implementation. So it should not be that we focus too much on monitoring now, and it's essential that the framework strikes a balance and is able to incorporate both.
Thank you. And for those who don't know what NABARD means, it's the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development. So it's a big player in Indian development. So thank you very much, Amlan. And on our agenda next, we have Veronica and Detu to speak about the work that they have done together with SIAT in Kenya. Veronica, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Henry. I'm trying to see how I could share my screen. I don't know what I lost. That I need to find the menu for sharing the screen. Are you able to help me from your end?
I can share the screen for you, Veronica, if you might.
Kindly, because I think seem to be having some issues.
So can you see?
Sure. Yes.
My screen? I'll just put that on.
I can see it. Yes. Thank you so much. I am not going to introduce myself again because it's in the screen and I've been introduced earlier. But we have been working, the minister has been working with the SIAT team plus a number of stakeholders in the sector to implement the ICAT project on adaptation. And this is based on what I'm going to say. So kindly go to the next slide, the first slide. Yes, agriculture sector in Kenya is a big priority because as envisaged in the Vision 2030, agriculture is one of the key economic sectors that is envisaged to provide food security raw materials for agro industries and also create employment opportunities for a majority of Kenyans and also create incomes. Agriculture is also one of the key emitters of greenhouse gases and one of the sectors that are very vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And so in the Kenyan NDC, agriculture is looked at as one of the key sectors that need to be addressed in areas of mitigation and adaptation to the impacts of climate change. So the NDC looks at the climate smart agriculture being the approach through which agriculture would achieve its mitigation and adaptation goal. Then we have 5-year national climate change action plans that implement the NDC. And one of the priority areas in our current NCCAP is the food and nutrition security, where again, targets have been set on climate smart agriculture that will show how climate smart agriculture will achieve the impact, the reducing emissions as well as achieving adaptation for agriculture. Towards this, agriculture sector developed the climate smart agriculture strategy and the implementation framework. The strategy lays down the strategic issues that need to be addressed for us to do climate smart agriculture, while the implementation framework looks at how the options that need to be implemented to operationalize the climate smart agriculture strategy. Next, please. Okay. There are issues in terms of the capacities to implement these activities. There are issues in terms of having the prerequisite tools. Also, the issues of having the capacity of the stakeholders, both as national and subnational level, be able to report on climate change actions. So the ICAT project addressed the agriculture sector with an objective of strengthening the capacity of the agriculture sector in Kenya to implement, monitor, and report adaptation actions in that sector. And the specific objectives included finalization of an M&T framework for CSA, which had started but not been concluded, operationalize a monitoring and evaluation tool for adaptation reporting, and also develop the capacity of building methodologies, because as I said, the stakeholders needed capacity to be able to report. So the tools and methodologies, and then the operationalization of those methodologies through training of the stakeholders on how to report, how to use the tools. Next, please. So the capacity requirements included having stakeholders, as has been said, at both national and subnational levels. Stakeholders in agriculture lack the capacity, and so these the capacity needs include having these stakeholders consolidate as multi-stakeholder platforms, consolidate information that would then enable the reporting. Also, the data collection and reporting tools, skills of the stakeholders to report, and also identification of reporting indicators and reporting guidelines, as well as forming a linkage between the different levels. And this we did in 3 counties because Kenya consists of 47 counties. So the project was able to work on 5 counties that are shown there in that map to identify their capacity needs, and as well as pilot the tools that I'm going to talk about. Next, please. So as I've said, I don't want to dwell on that. We have used a multi-stakeholder approach because we know that reporting climate change issues is not just about government. So stakeholders in agriculture have come together to enable an inclusive framework to enable coordination, also to reduce overlaps and duplication of actions across the various stakeholders, so that when we report, we do not duplicate. As we all know that enhanced transparency, we need to ensure that we are not duplicating efforts or reporting, and also facilitate implementation of the reporting on the Climate Change Act of Kenya, and to also ensure that there is incorporation of indigenous traditional knowledge, which needs to be taken into consideration as we implement, and also facilitate knowledge and experience sharing, so that then we could all be in the same platform as we implement. The next approach was, of course, as I have said, the Kenyan institution gives a big role to the sub-county governments, because they are the implementers of agriculture, while the national government is charged with the responsibility of developing policies and also ensuring that there is a capacity at the subnational level. So again, there was like a mandatory that we use the county levels to ensure, of course, inclusivity, and also to comply with the governance that is given, and also ensure that there is proper communication across or between the two levels of government and across different stakeholders. Next, please. So the project has assisted Kenya. As I said, the issues were to develop the M&D framework, so that we have that M&D framework in place. We also have an online tool in place, and we also have a document on reporting requirements for the different stakeholders in Kenya. And we also have a stakeholder capacity needs assessment. Besides that, we also have had a training on the tool. Next page, please. Training on the tool, whereby we started by developing training modules, and also we have carried out trainings, one at national level and 5 more in the subnational level, that is addressing the 5 counties that I have just talked about. Next, please. So the M&D framework, I think I will not belabor on that, but it is, of course, supposed to ensure that we are fostering an effective transformation in the agriculture sector, whereby we can be able to track that whether we are achieving increased resilience and low carbon development. Then also to ensure efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability in implementation, and also encourage a culture of monitoring and evaluation to provide evidence-based decision making. Then the next one is on the tool. This tool, I think, as I have said, has been now piloted in the 5 counties, and it is through support, though the ICAT project has just ended, through support of other MSP members, it is being piloted, or we are ongoing with looking at disseminating it, kind of piloting it in other counties. Currently, as I speak, there's some counties are still being trained on this tool, and we are excited about the way it is causing excitement about the reporting in agriculture, so that all the stakeholders in the different counties that we have been able to train are really excited and would want to continue or to be trained further on this tool. And they are also giving us feedback on improvements. And as I said, since the project has just ended, we are lucky that we have been working with the multi-stakeholder platform, and so other members of the platform are seeing the need for this tool and still continue supporting it. Next, please.
Please come to an end soon. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm ending actually. Yeah, so I think even without having to talk about the next slide, that is what I would have talked about. It is just about the reporting tool, how we are finding it useful, and how we hope that it is going to be used in reporting in the agriculture sector as the country positions itself to provide its first biannual transparency report. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Veronica, for this insightful presentation. And in the interest of time, please write down your questions or put them in the chat box so that we can pick them up afterwards when we have some time for Q&A. So I'll stop the presentation now and we'll ask Tirusha and Darlene to start sharing the screen so that we can continue with our colleagues from South Africa. So Darlene, Tirusha, I don't know who will start. The floor is yours.
Hi, colleagues. Thanks, Henry. I'll start, but I think you need to end first.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Okay, here we go. Oops. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And thanks for this opportunity for us to present on the work we've been doing in South Africa on the ICAT project. Our project consisted of 2 phases, the first being on the development of the M&E framework for multi-hazard early warning systems, and the second on the development of a loss and damage tool. I'll present on the first of these, and then my colleague Delian will present on the loss and damage tool. Okay, so South Africa already has an M&E framework in place, which it uses to track its progress towards its desired adaptation outcomes, commonly referred to as its desired DAOs. And one of these DAOs is on the need for the country to have early warning systems in place. But currently, we only measure the number of early warning systems. And so there's not a very good understanding of how effective these systems are. So in this project, our focus was around developing an M&E framework that could be used to test the effectiveness of early warning systems. And our approach to doing this started with using the WMO checklist for early warning systems. This is a checklist that has a comprehensive list of indicators that covers disaster risk information through to the preparedness and response. We refined this long list of indicators to make them applicable to the South African context. And this allowed us to shortlist the key indicators for South Africa, which we then workshopped with our government officials and other stakeholders and tested it through case studies. And this was an iterative process of refining the indicators. Once we had this short list of indicators, we then developed our framework of 3 elements. The first being efficiency of processes. And this is a set of indicators that covers the plans, processes, and to see if they are contributing towards the early warning system being effective. And ultimately, you're tracking your progress over planning cycles here. The second set of indicators is around the reliability indicators to assess if warnings are issued in a timely manner and if they're reaching all those it is intended to. So the first 2 sets of the elements of the framework are aligned to the WMO checklist with a focus on early warning systems and disaster risk management. In our third element of the framework, we focused on impact. And here we consider lives lost and damaged property. This part of the framework is more aligned to including climate change considerations. And by adding in this element to the framework, we're trying to bridge the gap between disaster risk damage responses and our climate change responses. And then once we had our system and our different elements of the framework and our indicators, we put this into a tool, a self-contained tool, so we would be able to easily use the indicators and capture the information. And the user would then score the different indicators based on the guidance provided to assess the different criteria. The tool calculates the average scores for each of the elements. And then you'll see here, we use the robot color classification scheme that the country uses to track its progress on the DAOs. We used it here to guide whether or not your scores for effectiveness are in the red, which means not good, or in the green, meaning it's in an ideal state. We then tested the frame and the tool for 2 case studies, being the Garden Route District Municipality and the eThekwini Municipality. Both have established early warning systems and are relatively well capacitated. The case studies did reveal that there are significant improvements at a local level in terms of the detection and monitoring of hazards, but that challenges remain with respect to the communication of the warnings and implementing an adequate response. For the Durban case study in particular, Durban has a state-of-the-art forecast early warning system, which produces impacts at very specific locations within the region. Last year, though, the city experienced devastating floods that resulted in around 450 lives being lost and thousands of people being displaced. What did work during this flood, what worked well, was the community-based early warning system between the university, municipality, and community. And this figure here we're showing on the right is, it was an area of over 1,000 informal houses that is located on a floodplain. And through this community-based early warning system, they had already mapped out areas that were prone to flooding. And so during those heavy rains in 2022, they were able to alert the community to these risks and put measures in place to help, prevent serious losses. And this kind of flood that Durban experienced also highlights the need for, very focused interventions at a community level. Obviously, this flood was mediated by many other factors, such as the nature of the storm, but also the degree to which adaptation measures have been implemented. And it points to the need to better understand impacts of disasters and the role of climate change in these. And on that point, I will hand over to Danielle, who will talk through our loss and damage framework. Danielle.
Thank you, Terusha. And you'll just skip the slides as I'm going along. So for the loss and damage framework, the needs assessment in South Africa highlighted that there is really a need to report on the impact of climate change disasters on human life, livestock, crops, housing, infrastructure, biodiversity, and the environment. And currently there are limited tools, methods, or data collection systems in place to guide the country on how it should approach the monitoring and evaluation of losses and damages, and track the country's progress towards mitigating impacts through adaptation efforts. So from an international perspective, loss and damage reporting will become an important aspect of the biennial transparency reports. So there's a need to better understand how loss and damage criteria are measured or defined, what data is required, and what are the roles and responsibilities of stakeholders that's involved in those. So for this project then, there was really a need to develop a framework and put that in place to help the country better monitor and evaluate the impacts of extreme weather events. Thanks. The approach that was followed in this was in developing the loss and damage framework was the review of existing frameworks on assessing the impact of climate-related hazards, to better understand the criteria measured, what data is required, as well as the roles of those involved. Then secondly, a range of data custodians in the country were consulted, and then the available data was sourced and analyzed. And this really helped us to identify existing challenges in terms of data, funding, and the institutional capacity of those involved. And from this information, we could ultimately develop the framework. Next. In terms of the economic and human impacts of disasters in South Africa, there the ones that have the most significant impact on the economy of the country are firstly floods, then droughts, then wildfire, and thereafter storms. So floods really have by far the most devastating economic and human impacts in the country. Next one. Looking at the stakeholders involved in reporting on loss and damage in the country, the project team have engaged with both government, research, and the private sector. The private sector mainly included the insurance industries. And yeah, and government mainly use this kind of information for their internal reporting and to plan for disaster relief funding, whereas the research and academia institutions gather loss and damage information as part of research projects, but that information really has a very limited focus. On the other hand, very good loss and damage information is gathered by the private sector, but they are not always that willing to share that. So the objective in this project was to get all three of these types of stakeholders to collaborate in sharing data towards a central data repository system for South Africa. Next one, Terusha. So this led us to the development of the loss and damage framework for the country. And this slide basically shows the outline of the various elements of the framework. It starts off, the framework starts off by explaining the context of loss and damage in the country, looking at major hazards, the impacts, existing databases, as well as legislation. Then it goes into defining the responsibilities of the stakeholders involved, as well as the institutional arrangements in loss and damage data collection. It further proposes a standardized description and classification of impacts aligned with the Sendai targets. And then the framework basically describes the necessary data architecture, as well as how data should be reported to other databases, so flowing between databases in South Africa, and then how it can be integrated into a central repository for the country to fulfill its international reporting requirements. Next one. In developing this framework, we really encountered several challenges ranging from data gaps and inconsistencies, lack of consistent classification of disasters, poor coordination between stakeholders, lack of capacity in government, as well as a lack of funding. So we've identified really a few challenges, but then as part of the framework, we also instituted some interventions to try to address these challenges, such as best practice collection methods, standardized classification of hazard events, clearly defining roles and responsibilities of the stakeholders, and simplifying data collection so that government officials are not overwhelmed with the burden of too many tools, and also avoiding duplication of work. Thanks. Next slide. Just shortly, in terms of the practical application of the framework, it will ensure that the stakeholders and other role players are better coordinated in this process, that they understand their roles in reporting on loss and data collection. And the framework also aims to standardize and simplify data collection, raise awareness, and help the country fulfill its reporting requirements, as I've said previously. And then in the last slide, a key outcome of this framework was the development of a simple Excel-based loss and damage tool aimed at local government to help them monitor climate impacts. It's really an easy-to-use Excel tool, as I said, and it focuses on the most critical elements and data needs to monitor climate impacts. And along with this tool, we've developed a guidance document, and we've tested it with several stakeholders. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah,
thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Terusha and Darlene, for your excellent presentations. And again, in the interest of time, I'd like to move on next to Kavya and Taurine. I don't know who of you would like to start. Maybe Taurine can start. And again, those of you listening to these presentations, please write down your questions or put them into the chat box so that we can then look at them afterwards. And I would like to ask Taurine maybe to start talking about locally led adaptation and how that interacts essentially with the presentations we've just heard, which focus primarily at the national level, of course. So there is a tension here potentially, and I'd like Taurine to explore this tension in 2 to 3 minutes only, so that we don't lose too much time. And I apologize for the delays we've had to get started, which is cutting into our time for conversation afterwards. So,
Right. Can
Taurine,
you see
go
me?
ahead.
Can you see me?
I can't see you yet.
I think my videos of my webcam is disturbing. Apologies for that. I'll just start anyway.
Yeah.
So to start with, I think the question that Henry asked me, I think the presentation so far have already, described them in a different way. But to start with, I think I would like to, when talking about locally led adaptation, what do we actually mean by that? I think locally led, to understand how ICAT has actually played, has impacted the locally led adaptation in its partner countries, we need to understand what it actually means, because LLA, local adaptation, refers to a process of developing and implementing climate adaptation strategies that are primarily owned by local communities and stakeholders. So the approach of adaptation in this recognizes that local communities are often the most vulnerable, and they need to take charge of their own resilience, and they need to take charge of their own interventions to overcome the vulnerability. And I think if you read about it more, you'll find out that it's actually locally led adaptation actually involves engaging with local stakeholders in decision-making processes, building their capacity, and implementing adaptation measures. And I think ICAT is actually doing that through its partnering with its partner countries. For example, as we've already seen in the presentations, ICAT is actually helping through partnering with national stakeholders and actually through developing or building the capacity of the national government or the local government agencies to actually to strengthen their capacity and to engage in the adaptation processes of the local stakeholders, and by helping the country partners developing a set of clear and accessible guidelines for how to go ahead, and also creating opportunities for them to improve their transparency and accountability processes of choosing projects and actually implementing adaptation projects at the local level. And mostly, I think 2 of the countries are actually involved mostly in adaptation agriculture, which is I think the primary the bread and butter for the local communities in most of the LDCs. So by doing that, actually ICAT is helping develop the capacities of the local communities, developing their leaderships, the ownership of adaptation efforts in the local communities, and actually helping locally led adaptation in that way. If I have to speak about from my experience of working with ICAT, I would like to cite about the Bangladesh Climate Change Trust Fund, which the Bangladesh partners ICAT and BCS are doing. If you're not aware, Bangladesh is one of the few countries which are actually using their domestic resources financially for funding climate change action, be it adaptation or mitigation, more than relying on the foreign resources. For example, the Bangladesh Climate Change Trust Fund, which is BCCT, has allocated 480 million USD as of 2022 from domestic resources to actually fund climate action. And Priya has actually spoken in details about it. So the BCCT, as we have seen in Priya's presentation, has a good monitoring structure, but only limited to tracking its budgetary actions. but there is no mechanism in place to track the impacts that the projects, or the impacts of the ground level in terms of adaptation interventions. Or to be precise, to what extent have the projects being funded by BCCT been able to actually increase the adaptation capacity of the local communities? So the tool being developed under ICAT is actually designed to actually track and see and track and measure the impacts made by the adaptation initiatives, adaptation projects funded by BCCT, and if done, and I think through this tool, ICAT will have a breakthrough. Will bring a breakthrough in Bangladesh in tracking how the domestic risk, the primary domestic fund, which is the BCCT, is able to fund adaptation at local level and actually help amplify locally led adaptation in Bangladesh. And I think Bangladesh is one example, and the others have already spoken about the other countries. And I think this is a very important thing that the ICAT is doing, and I think BCCT is only one avenue of it. There are other avenues of which are also working to amplify locally led adaptation. So if ICAT, I think, can actually explore that and amplify or accelerate its actions and diversify its interventions in other countries, and also in other avenues of the already existing partner countries. So yeah, that's it from my end. Thank you.
Thank you, Tori, and that was really great. It showed, I'm not going to explain it again, but the connection between BCCT and projects at the local level are the way through which locally led adaptation is making its way into the national framing and adaptation strategies. And I think it's a really good analogy and description of how this is working. And it's not only the case, of course, for BCCT, but for the other projects as well. Great. So without further ado, last but not least, Kavya, could you talk a little bit about, the components of youth and gender in the context of ICAT from your perspective? Thank you.
Thank you, Henry, and thank you for bringing up this tension in scales here. So I think with this focus on locally led adaptation, it's actually an opportunity to justify or rectify a lot of historic and gendered injustices. And, the marginalized narrative of just transitions and adaptation becomes very prominent here, because in many of the ICAT countries, the question of gender in adaptation is also a question of long-standing issues of land and precarity of female labor. So a lot of adaptation initiatives, for example, climate smart agriculture itself leads to overburdening for women because it includes more demands on their time. So if you look at adaptation policy, you see dual conceptualizations of women, either as vulnerable victims and at the same time also adaptation champions. So beyond this narrative that centers around care, which has an affinity to women's biological traits, I think ICAT has a fantastic opportunity, like Turin mentioned, with capacity building initiatives to center questions of gender in relation to the larger development issues like land, labor, etc. And when it becomes an integrated issue that is analyzed at the local level, I think a lot of non-state actors have a prominent role to play in taking this message to the national level. This is where I guess regular policy consultations between non-state actors and the policymakers can prove effective to bring adaptation to a transformative narrative. And this also presents an ideal opportunity to address a lot of questions that development researchers or gender researchers were focusing, but now with adaptation, this is possibly becoming an opportunity to transform, or not just to bounce back, but to build a new normal. So, and here the role of youth, I guess, is in understanding how gendered norms are institutionalized in the policy process. And here, there is possibility for bringing about change, which is not just capacity building for development or adaptation training, but rather capacity, a critical consciousness to question engendered social norms around care, which kind of overburdens women, not just because of the vulnerabilities associated with climate change, but sometimes the adaptation actions itself. So I guess youth role here is basically to do this consciousness building and also be agents of capacity development. Yeah, with this, I would like to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kavya, for this insightful reflection on gender and youth in the context of the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency. And if I understand things correctly, it's very much along the same lines of locally led adaptation and non-state actors engaging at that level, through which the national strategies become connected to what is meaningful and ultimately important to, in terms of issues related to land and labor and equity, etc., what you all mentioned. So great. Really appreciate those insights. Thank you. Now, we have a few more minutes before the end of our session, and I would really like to invite the participants who stayed with us for this entire period. And I've been tracking the participation. It's been going up and down a little bit. I can see some applause here in the background. Thank you. So can I ask those who are here as attendees to raise their, basically raise their hands so I can allow them to speak. I think it's easier than trying to frame the questions through the chat box by now. I don't think there were any questions articulated in that matter, in that way. So Faraz, Irene, Ivy, J. John, whoever that may be, Shoili or Shohail, and we have Mohammed Ahasa Habib. Any of you have any questions or comments that you would like to raise at this point? And Taurine, tell me, how does this work? Can they raise their hands, the participants?
Yes, I think they can raise their hands. And I think there was a question from an attendee, but I think unfortunately he left, so the question disappeared.
Oh, yes, I think that was Vincent Gainey, actually, who happened to be part of our steering committee on the adaptation gap report.
Yes, I think his
year.
question was something along the lines of how the Bangladesh the governance structure is how top it's very top to bottom. So how is it? How could it be navigated to actually implement the activities properly under ICAT? I think it was along those lines.
Okay, but since he's no longer here, answering that question isn't going to be very helpful, I'm afraid. So
I did respond in the chat to the question briefly. So
excellent. Maybe that's why Vincent left. Anybody else who would like to take a shot at one of the panelists and ask a question regarding Kenya, South Africa, India, or Bangladesh, the work that we did there? I mean, if everybody feels completely satisfied with everything, then that's fine. Faraz, did you, I don't know, you seemed like you were unmuted for a moment. Please don't be shy. There are no wrong questions. There are only interesting questions. Okay. Do any
Henry,
of
there's a few in the Q&A section. I think Jay John,
I can't.
but I'm not able to see them on the
Yeah, I've been trying.
list,
I don't
so I
know.
can't give them mic access. But they seem to be typing. Maybe they're from Hong Kong.
I think Jay John asked the question, perhaps just a general question. How can progress in developing tools be monitored? His name is Juanet or Juanet, I'm not sure. That was his question. I think they cannot access the chat. That's why they're asking the question.
Okay, great. So I'm sorry. I don't know why this isn't
Go ahead.
working, but would anybody like to answer that question? Maybe even Saqib, since you joined, you want to take a go at answering that question?
Sure. Sorry for the background. I'm at the conference command center, so there's quite a lot of people around me. So it predominantly for us in the Bangladesh case study, what we've been trying to do, as Priya mentioned in the previous case, is that the adaptation monitoring has been particularly difficult in Bangladesh just because the monitoring tools were not set up for adaptation themselves. There were more budgetary and sort of quantitative monitoring in the primary place. So at least on the government side, what we've been trying to do in terms of tracking the progress and making sure that we've been able to sort of put in the adaptation thinking across all the different projects that the trust fund has been doing. And in essence, because the trust fund sits under the ministry, we're hoping that that will reflect into the ministry and being able to implement it in broader projects outside of the trust fund themselves. And I think maybe picking up on Vincent's previous question, the government as well has been having a sort of a rethink in terms of how monitoring is best situated within the framework of their projects as well. And quite a lot of the local government institutes have been sort of working at the community level. So we do see some progress conceptually in terms of how they're thinking about monitoring the adaptation impacts that are happening. Perhaps we're a few years away from them to be fully devolved and locally led as we would like them to be in terms of community engagement and inclusivity. But at least that's something that we've been able to sort of bring out, and hopefully that's something that will be keeping the momentum going with them in terms of tracking the adaptation impacts that have been happening across Bangladesh. I'll end on that.
Great, thank you, Saqib. And anybody
Just
else who would like to step
a
in?
little bit to what Saqib just talked about. Since we have been working with the BCCT and we really had to start from the scratch to get them to, starting from getting them to understand the difference between working on like tracking a regular project and tracking a climate change project. So although we have been working with them for quite a few years now, but the progress has been really slow since, of course, there are factors such as the change in the head of the organization and trying to get them on board every time and then picking up our work from there again and again. So all that, and also they did not even have a monitoring framework to start with. So for us to align to something that already exists within the organization would be much easier. So a lot of you may have difficulty in understanding the context in Bangladesh and working with the government in that sense. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Priya. So I can see that Faraz has added a question to the Q&A box. Are there any plans to expand activities under ICAT in the future in the existing partner countries? I cannot answer that question fully. I know for some countries that there are plans to go beyond what we have done so far. There are some interests there. India has shown some interest. The Kenyan colleagues have shown interest and are planning to do more work in ICAT. And I do believe that other partners are also thinking about it. Bangladesh, the work will continue a little bit more. So there are activities going on. In addition, there are countries that are showing interest in using some of the ICAT methodologies and in applying them, expanding them to make them, turn them into national strategies and methodologies for their M&E systems. So that there is some progress here. And just to follow up on Juanette's question, how progress in developing M&E tools can be monitored, I would like to refer to the Adaptation Gap Report, in which we actually do this on a regular basis. We count the M&E systems that are being developed or in place in countries as reported through their NDCs and their national adaptation plans. So here is how we are tracking that in the context of the Adaptation Gap Report, Joanette. And with that, I think we've run out of time. And I think it was really a very good session. I'm sorry there were so few participants, but those who were there, I'm hoping, thought it was also useful and insightful. And I hope that the answers they've received from the panelists are really interesting for them and might lead to further collaboration and reaching out to us through the ICAT Secretariat or through us here at UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center. Please also feel free to get in touch with any of the speakers. And I've already mentioned, you can access their bios through the Gobishona website. And with that, I'm going to have to stop here. And I'm told that our two rapporteurs, Cecira and Smita, are going to provide some short answers, upload those to the website as well very soon. So thank you all.
Henry,
Thank you,
can we take
Doreen.
a group photo before we leave? Maybe we could all turn on our video.